Hi, I'm Andre, and I'm a black nerd. But why is that? Why do I call myself Black Nerd? Why do I call this channel Black Nerd Comedy? Believe it or not, it's a question that I am asked very often. Some people ask it from a curious perspective. They just are curious to know, because I started the channel so long ago, why I would choose that name, why that was the name I decided to go with for my YouTube channel. Some people kind of ask it from the standpoint of, why do you gotta call yourself Black Nerd? Why can't you just call yourself Nerd? Why you gotta put black in it and make it all racial or political? What if I call myself White Nerd? Would you like that? And I'm like, I don't know, is the username available? You do you. I figured let me give you the explanation from my own voice to your ear holes. And just to clarify in this story, I'm gonna probably be using the words black entertainment and nerd entertainment. Let me just make it clear, I'm just meaning things that are pretty much aimed towards or trying to hit a majority black audience. Things that are trying to hit a very specific nerd or geek genre type of audience. Doesn't mean that anything black can't be nerdy. Doesn't mean that anything nerdy can't be black. They obviously can do that. I'm just trying to generalize for the sake of the story. All right? Don't be taking stuff I'd say out of context. I know how I go out there on that internet. Sometimes when people hear the name Black Nerd, they're thinking like, oh, is this some kind of thing where it's like you're a nerd, but you gotta add black to it like it's a label? Not exactly. I look at less as black being a label of nerd in general, and more of it like a Venn diagram. I was a nerdy kid growing up. I think that goes without saying. I was into a bunch of geeky stuff. Not as much geeky stuff as some of the hardcore nerds and geeks out there, but I loved my cartoons. I love the toys I can get my hands on. I love the comics I can get my hands on, which is usually the stuff from the grocery store. Thanks a lot, Archie and Jughead. Video games, of course. But in addition to the entertainment side of nerddom, I was also that schoolboy, you know, the one that got the honor roll. I was that kid that would be like, hey, teacher, do we have any homework today before we leave school? You know, that kid. That was me. Sorry. Sorry to all the extra homework that my classmates got because of my big mouth. I lived in majority black neighborhoods, which actually surprises some people. Like, I was at a YouTube black event and I was hanging out with some other black YouTubers, and we were talking about, you know, school times and whatnot. And I said something about how I went to a majority black school. I went to a school that was like 90-something% black. And the look on their faces when they realized that that was the case for me, like, shocked them. They thought I went to a school like, I don't know, Bayside, and I was Lisa Turtle. But there were some times where I was in different neighborhoods, and then when I went to college, where I was more on the other side of the tokens, the Lisa Turtles. So because I had a lot of times in my life where I was surrounded by fellow black people, and some occasional times in my life where I was one of the few black people, you remember your race pretty well. Black entertainment was a really big part of my upbringing as well. I watched a lot of black sitcoms. My dad and my mom would watch movies that had a majority black cast, and I would watch it with them, particularly when it was the PG-13 and R-rated movies when I was a kid. Those were the only times where I could see them, was when they were watching them. I might know some hip-hop songs that play on the radio, but I might not know the deep underground hip-hop stuff. I got a lot of that growing up, as well as all the cartoony, geeky, funny, weird stuff that I grew up with on my own. So I look at black entertainment as a big circle in my Venn diagram, and I look at geek and nerd entertainment as another circle in my Venn diagram, and when they cross, that little section in the middle where the two of them meet, where they two cross together, that's me. That's me in a nutshell. And the reason why I think that perfectly describes me is because while there's a little part that gets to combine together that I'm into, like that's my area, there's a giant piece of the black entertainment side that is not being touched by that little middle part that I'm still don't know that much about. And there's a giant piece of the nerd/geek entertainment side that I don't know that much about that's over on this side. When I'm around a bunch of black people, there's things that they say and I go, oh, I'm right there with you. And then they say some things where I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about that. I'm sorry. And there are times where I'm around a bunch of nerds and other black nerds talking about some stuff, and I'm like, oh, I got you. And then they go on some nerd tangents where I'm like, okay, you lost me here. So as much as there was so much stuff that I was really into, there was also a lot of stuff that I missed. I did as much as I could with the access that I had. And I think that that culminated into the type of person that I was. Now, obviously, this is not to say that everything that is black is not nerd and everything that is nerd is not black. You know, like the things that if you are in that very deep, you would know. So don't anyone, I know someone's gonna take offense to that anyway, but don't anyone take offense in thinking like, oh, black can't be nerds and nerd can't be black. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is that you didn't see a lot of it, at least in entertainment, expressed that much. I mean, we had Urkel. We had Lamar from Revenge of the Nerds. We had the black dude from Die Hard. Not Carl Winslow. I'm talking about the dude that like did the programming. And then it starts getting slim pickings after that. So that's kind of where the inspiration came from. It wasn't about just taking one side of this and making a label to it. It was about how both of those things made me, were a part of my life and a part of my upbringing. And that leads me all the way through elementary school, middle school, high school, college, and of course, adulthood. Went to college for computer science. I was a programmer, y'all. But while I was in college, I got interested more and more in entertainment. I took a theater class in college because we had to take an elective outside of computer stuff as part of our curriculum. I started taking improv classes. Then when I got into adulthood, I continued with improv. And then while I was doing improv, I met people who were doing stand-up. Basically, I had some people who were doing stand-up take me under their wing a little bit, give me some tips and pointers. And of course, one of the things they talk about is that when you're doing stand-up, you want to come from a personal place. Put some truth in your comedy. Talk about some experiences that you are familiar with. Now, I grew up watching a lot of stand-up. My dad and mom and I used to watch BET Comic View and stand-up specials. It's pretty well known that there's nothing wrong with it because it can be done funny, but there's obviously a lot of times when the joke comes up of white people do this, black people do this. When a white guy drives a car, he's like, yes, 10 and 2, I'm driving the car. But when a black guy drives a car, they're like, oh yeah, son, pump up my jam. Being a black nerd, I thought it would be kind of fun in stand-up to put a little twist on that formula and not ever feeling 100% anywhere. It was also around this time that MySpace was allowing you to have vanity URLs, and so it made sense for me since I was doing black nerd comedy on stage. So I was myspace.com/blacknerd. I don't know if that still exists, but that's what it was. A friend of mine recommended me to the show Beauty and the Geek. It's this reality show that they used to have on the CW where we're gonna put a bunch of beautiful women and a bunch of geeky dudes in the same house. What's gonna happen? And I got recommended by my friend who knew about my MySpace page that kind of proved how nerdy I was because they had never had a black nerd on the show. And so they were like, oh, that's great. But I got all the way to like the final round. Like I even got to meet Ashton Kutcher and everything seemed good. And then I was told that like the network wasn't interested in me at the time. Cut the years later where I hosted the special discontinued on the CW. But because I did that, I made a video. Of course, the video was about me being a black nerd. And it was around this time that I started learning about YouTube. So if you watch the first 3 videos on my YouTube channel, that is the video that I submitted for that show. Of course, when making a YouTube channel, I had to decide a YouTube name. I talked with a couple of friends of mine to figure out what name I would have chosen. At the time, a lot of YouTubers were using nicknames and aliases to call their channel certain things or to call themselves certain things. So I was just kind of playing along, seeing what I saw on YouTube. Whereas nowadays, you do see a lot more people who will use their actual names, or even if it's not their actual name, it sounds like a name. Like it might be an alias, but it sounds like a normal name as opposed to some, wacky nickname with numbers and characters at the end of it. So I remember coming up with names like Black Nerd TV, Black Nerd Tube. I think Andre Black Nerd was a name I was considering at one time, and sometimes I think back and wonder if that would have made more sense just because that way I would have had at least my first name in my YouTube channel name as well as Black Nerd. But since I was doing a lot of comedy at the time and Black Nerd Comedy just seemed like it had a nice ring to it, that's what I went with, was Black Nerd Comedy on YouTube, and put those videos from my Beauty and the Geek audition as the first videos, took off from there, and then that's what started the whole Black Nerd Comedy YouTube channel. And there were a couple of websites that were talking about Black Nerd stuff in general, but compared to today, there was not a lot of Black nerd presence on the internet. Obviously, Black nerds existed. I've known many in my life, so it's no surprise at all that Black nerds exist. We obviously know it's a thing that's existed for several decades, but when it comes to certain circles or certain forms of entertainment, it just wasn't a thing that was very strong in entertainment, so it even made me more wanting to put something like that out there. Just, if anything, to just have that presence out there and hope that other people can relate. And I've gotten messages all the time from people, even to this day, where they're like, oh my gosh, I'm in some area where I think I'm the only Black nerd around, and now you made me feel like that I'm not. And that's really cool. Or what's really interesting nowadays is you see people that you never would have suspected to be into nerd stuff because of just how their nature, their stature is. And then you find out they like some of the nerdiest things you could ever think of, which is really cool. Now you see it big time. Like there's so many sites, channels, people, programs that are very much talking about being Black in the world of nerd. And I'm not going to ever say that I'm the reason why that happened, because that's just a little too egotistical. If anything, if I was just a part of it, if I was a part of the reason that this is happening bigger now for this generation, that Black is not one thing. Like it's not one specific style or way of being or speech pattern or dialogue or interest, that you can have different types of Black people all over this place, because we do. We do. Not two of us are the same, you know? It's not that simple. There's just no one way to be black, you know? And I think that was really cool that we see probably now more than ever that those different ways can exist. And I think that's really awesome. But because of that, I do kind of find it interesting now that I sometimes look at my name, or sometimes people will question my name. And while there are some people who are questioning it simply because of the race part, there are some people who do question it because now they've grown up in a generation where it doesn't seem that odd to hear a black person prominently stating how much they are a nerd about certain things. So I find it very interesting that now you're seeing more and more people being very, very bold about it and very strong about it. Sometimes that does make me wonder if the name still makes sense today. You know, like is it almost outdated in a way because it made sense at its time, but maybe doesn't make as much sense now because there are so many people that do it. Sometimes I question if maybe I shouldn't have called myself that and maybe should have just used my actual name or some other nickname. But then there's a part of me that wonders if I didn't use Black Nerd Comedy and I used just like my name or something else, would I be as successful? Did that name bring people in that maybe would not have come in if I didn't use it? I don't know. I just know that it's the name I chose, and it really is no deeper than I was a black guy who's a nerd who's doing comedy at the time I made my YouTube channel, and therefore I decided to name my channel Black Nerd Comedy. There was no huge political statement behind it, no huge social statement behind it. It was just, I saw a name that wasn't being used that represented me, and I thought by saying, hi, I'm Andre and I'm a black nerd in my videos, as well as calling the channel Black Nerd Comedy, that it almost just puts the race thing out in front to then be able to move past it, to then show that the stuff that I'm into could be the exact same stuff that you're into, no matter what your background is. Because sometimes when someone sees a black person talking about whatever and they are not black, they sometimes assume, am I going to get it? Am I going to understand it? And that's kind of my point. Let's just clear the elephant in the room. I'm a black dude, but let's move on. And look, I like nerdy stuff. And hey, surprise, I like some of the same nerdy stuff that you like too, because nerdy stuff is universal and anyone can like it. Duh. It's amazing how the simplest thing can sometimes feel complicated for some people. So all I'm just basically saying is, it's just a name. It really is just a name that defined me, that defined my channel at the time, still defines it to this day. I'm still a black guy, so last I checked, and I'm still nerdy, last time I checked. The comedy's wavery, that's fine, that's debatable. But it's just me, it's just me, it's just Andre. I did have a second channel for a while, that was youtube.com/Andre, but I don't know, maybe I would bring that up again if I feel like I need to do something a little bit more personal. Maybe I'll just have it redirected here if I decide to make this more personal. I don't know. All I'm saying is that, just name. And it's just me. Hi, I'm Andre, and I'm a black nerd. Thank you. Thanks for watching this video. I hope this history of some kind helped you out. If there's ever anything about my background that you are like, oh, I want to know more about that, I would be more than glad to share. Just tell me what it is. Tell me what you'd like to hear about. Leave that in the comments. That's the kind of comments I would look forward to reading. I'm also on Twitch, twitch.tv/BlackNerdComedy. So be sure to check me out there as well. I might be on there right now. You never know. If you're new here, if you haven't already, please tickle that subscribe button and also ring that notification to be part of my squad by the bell. Thanks for watching this video. Give it a thumbs up if you like it. I love you like a play cousin. I'm Outie 5000.